Hello and welcome to the first results video for our Creator Challenge of August 2023. This is the first month of our Creator Challenge, and what it is every month on Patreon, patrons get access to a mini game jam, a little challenge to put together and submit a project file, not the game, but a project file. And I'll go through and look at the project files and look at what kind of things that people have been doing, how they've solved the problem all on their own with no guidance, and seeing how useful it is for a game designer to put into their games. So with all of these sort of challenges, there are a few things that we're looking at in particular. One, first of all, is flexibility. How flexible can we use this thing in other parts of the game and other parts of the level? Can we configure it as much as possible? Which brings me to a second point, which is configurability. I want lots of options to be able to change on this, but I don't want to be daunted too much with really minutiae things. We want to make things that make sense for what this thing could be used for. And the challenge for this first month was to create a cannon. A cannon that we'd see in many different games for various different game types. And so we're looking for really cool, interesting things we could do with a cannon, such as controllability, what kind of projectiles it can fire, and various other things we can configure. And thirdly, expandability. Would it make sense for me to make children classes of this class and make it more useful in the long term there? Could I use it for expanding into different types of objects if I can? More flexibility I have there, the better the asset would be for any sort of game designer. And if you're not a patron but still want to challenge yourself, feel free to take the challenge from this video and apply it to yourself and test yourself against it. So we're going to take a look at a few examples of the submissions. I want to say well done to everyone who did submit for the Creator Challenge this month, and well done to everyone who did. And I say we're just sort of summarizing what kind of points there are. Let's highlight and take a look at some particular examples. But to start things off, we've got Tarr here with his cannon design. Now, his cannons have lots of different features on them with a load of sliders that we can change different strength, different speeds, all these various things, which are really useful things to have on our cannon designs. The one thing I would like to have seen more of on this one would be more of an interactive element. So you could use a cannon for both interactive and non-interactive, but it's not too bad. So we've got a load of different things we can change, which is excellent. Inside the actual code itself, it's not too bad either. We've got a lot of things that are lined up that don't make sense to be. So for example, track player, we've got a yes or no enum. That's a boolean. Just use a boolean. No point in going the extra level with an enum. You might just need to change, and typically with all your booleans, try to write them out as questions. So rather than say track player question mark, say is tracking player, and that'll be a boolean response. Can be destroyed. See, it's already fine. It makes sense to keep it a boolean. What was confusing was that you had these as enums, and then you had some other ones which were booleans, which didn't make much sense. So yeah, it would make more sense if these were just booleans. Other than that, pretty standard stuff we've got going on here. We're using timelines to move and tracking of this thing. So when it targets a player, we can rotate the face of the player, and we're working out a rotation rate. If I go inside of this, we can see what he's done here is he's doing an R-interp to determine the speed of rotation, the rotation. What would be nice is using this interp speed to change the speed of that rotation so we can adjust it quicker if we need to. Because at the moment, this is not really a rotation rate, this is just the rotation of it. How much is it rotating every single second? The rotation rate would be nice if we could like adjust it some kind. If we go into the timeline, we've done a nice thing here where we've got nearly 0 to 1, no 2.5, sorry, in time, and the value of 1, which is good. It means it's normalized, it means it's a lot more stretchable and usable for various different things. So good effort there. So yeah, my tip for your one, Jason, is to move the enums to booleans and use those there. And also think about what else you could do to sort of tidy things up, because obviously we're going to get into a place where this is going to get quite busy. Think about how we could reuse a lot of this stuff. So it could be as simple as we've got cannon mesh, world location, actor location of the player, find lookout rotation, and get target rotation. You could just easily tidy this up by just right clicking on that and collapse into a function and calling it get player facing rotation. And inside there, we can make it so it outputs the float here. So return mode as well as set it. Yeah, and it just makes things a little bit tidier by spreading things out and splitting up a little bit there. So yeah, and you keep going. You can break down, see what else you can break down into smaller chunks. The smaller, more chunked up it is, typically the better. And here we have a C++ project from Stephen Nichols, who has made ourselves a cannon pawn that we can add some control to it using our mouse by aiming and shooting a gravity-based projectile. And he's put on some configurations for this thing too. Quite nice. We can go into here and set up like the speeds and rotation values. We can customize all that. But let's take a look at what he's actually done behind the hood on the code side of things. So he's made the cannon a pawn because he's doing direct control of it. Which you could argue you may not need to use it because you could just enable the input on that device and add it to input stack, but it's fine as a pawn. There's no reason why not to. So we've got a basic setup of the components, basic setup of the default values, begin play, adding the input system to it, all very well and good. Setting up the input binding actions for aim and try and fire. So when we click, we can shoot. And we've got update last time the cannon was fired. We get world and get time in seconds. That's not too bad. Okay, that's good. So it allows us to stop the time from that issue. Yeah. Next, we're checking if the cannon projectile exists. The cannon projectile is a variable assigned, determining what projectile it is that you're firing. And we've got the spawn parameters, and we're just spawning it in and telling it to launch the projectile straight away as soon as it's coming in. That's good. So one thing you'd want to be doing when you're doing these sort of code things here is if you're doing like checking if your cannon projectile is valid. If it's not valid, try to think about what you can do as a sort of error checking for the user. So if the designer's putting it into their scene, you want to give them a reason why it's not working. Just do a simple print string of a message here saying error needs projectile. It's just a way of communicating from programmer to designer. So when they drag these things into their level, they know why it's not working. It's because they're missing a projectile. And that's all fine to do that. With sounds as well if you want to, but I'll definitely do it on a cannon projectile because it's quite vital to the functioning of the cannon. Next, we've got some basic input movements with the mouse. We're just looking up and down and positioning the cannon based on the cannon range. Yeah, we're just basically just rolling it back and forward. Pretty basic rotation stuff. Yep, not too bad. And here we just turn the actual fire. So if we can fire, basically we're doing this. And I would probably put in a different function as well. So you've got try to fire, we've got aim. I'd put a different one for like can fire. And that's where you'll do a Boolean output saying returns Boolean saying whether or not it can fire or not. And then therefore you can put in different parameters for requirements to fire the cannon. So it could be time, could be ammo, it could be just disabled. Give us some more options there for the player designer to mess about with. But yeah, good, strong effort, and good to see some C++. Excellent, good job. Next up, we've got Jason Moules, who has submitted a cannon project with loads of options we can do, including changing the visual effects we have, type of sounds we have, projectiles, colors of the cannons, all very nice. And he's set up for his cannons that's actually quite simple. So we've got an event graph which just decides whether or not it's going to be continuous fire or controlled by the player, and it's just setting a timer and setting that timer based upon the fire rate on a loop. And all it's doing when it fires the cannon is he's checking for the sound, playing the sound if it's valid, which is great use of validation checking. If the user does not apply a sound, it's not going to error out. It makes it nice for the user. Don't have to worry about any issues there. But much like I mentioned with Stephen, you may want to put in some sort of message saying no sound acquired, like just a print string for debug purposes, so the designers know why the sound's not playing. When you get into the visual effects side of things, you're doing the same thing, which is great. And then we're spawning the projectile every single time. Now at the moment we're spawning it in a projectile start, which you've put over here at the start of the cannon, which is not too bad. Be aware, obviously Jason hasn't done it here, but if you were to put it inside the cannon, you might get some collision issues. So this is why you typically want to put it just outside at the front of the object. If it is something that you want to do that's inside an object and coming out of it, then you have to worry about collision. So I'd recommend turning for collision until it leaves the area and then turning collision on. But if we go back to his fire cannon, we're spawning in these actors and we're passing through various information about each projectile. The projectiles themselves, there are different types he's done. Ones that can glide, ones that have got gravity on them. Yeah, pretty nice. And in here, we've got basic impulse firing on based upon our settings, which is excellent. So as a very simple setup here, we've got adjust the tube as well if you want to when we're controlling it. But yeah, we've got a nice combination of 3 different types here, showcasing just how different you can make them. Now, the one thing I would say you think about adding to this, Jason, is when you're doing your cannons here, at the very start on begin play, we're deciding whether or not it's continuous fire or not. There's no option for us to change that and to trigger it again. So, for example, if we've got a cannon later on in level and you don't want it to be firing all the time because that's a waste of resources, we want to turn it on, enable it. You want to be able to enable it through here. So, rather than doing begin play into here, we can make another custom event like start firing, for example, and make it a different custom event, one that can be called from your level blueprint, game mode, whatever. You can set up with this, and it can also do it with like sequences as well. So make it part of the cutscene. You can do, and it's very simple to try and do now. We've got it as a separate function. But yeah, good job. An example of what I was just saying there to Jason is visible inside Benjamin Slob's game that he submitted with this cannon design. And in here, we've got in an activate and deactivate trigger, where we can activate and deactivate it and start it firing off whenever we like, which is a very nice way of controlling when you want these things to start doing their job. And stop as well. And you can see here, it's basically doing what I just did on Jason's one, where we're plugging in a different custom event and reactivating it. And so all he's doing here is spawning sound, spawning emitters, and then we've got a simple movement control to showcase the sort of animation of the character movement, the barrel movement, sorry, not character, and firing the gun off. So on spawn projectile here, we're doing a very simple spawn projectile and sending over the scale of it, rotation, and firing point. So not much customization. If we place it in his level, we don't have much option here. We can change the cannon delay, we can change the fire rate, but at no point can we do things like customize the projectile and customize the speed of it, or the impact explosion, or make it triggerable by the player. We're quite limited in design for this. And say when you're programming these things for designers in your team, you typically want to make it as flexible as possible, and giving as much freedom to move, because otherwise they just keep coming back to you with questions about how to do X, Y, Z things on it. Yeah, so I'll just play it so you can see a little bit of what Ben's done. Now, for these creative challenges, you do not need to make a whole game. You literally just stick it into a room if you want, and that's it. You don't need to make a whole game. But Ben has. So you can see here, we've got a nice animation. Yeah, using a nice easing of the curves to send that over. Got different fire rates. Okay, overall, good job. But I think a bit more customization, a bit more flexibility will make it far more useful for designers to put into their games. Next up, we've got Kaitlyn, who has put together an interesting cannon design because it has a ton of different configurations on it. You can see here on the right hand side details panel just how many custom categories she's made to fit all the different things she has on them. But take note that you don't need to separate them like lifetime projectile into a separate thing. It would be just fine to put projectile properties in its own sort of category. Don't try to make things get lost around all this stuff. And furthermore, when we go actually into the cannon, when you've got the spawn actor looking like this, in this case, you're better off making it a struct. So you send a struct over to the cannon, and it's just makes it a bit more readable, a bit more easier to manage and follow. But yeah, a couple of little things about this one as well. We've got begin play. There we go. We're checking if it's explosive projectile or not. And if it is explosive, we're increasing the explosive projectile damage and adding that to that. We're then setting its health and getting a cannon and getting a widget for the cannon and passing health to UI. Fire on the fixed timer, true or false. And we've got loads of different things we could do to fire on bursts. We can do fire on the timers. You've got loads of different options available to you, which is kind of neat. Albeit it does get a bit messy over here when we've got all sorts of things going on. So we've got choose behavior changes. So on then 0, it goes up to here. We've got another sequence with another 4 things in it. And in each one here, we're changing the fire rate based upon what we want it to do. And we've got all these different things going on, but it kind of feels all like, do we need to have change cannon fire rate? Do we need that as a thing? Can we just use the fire rate as a variable and just use that as it is? We probably don't need to worry about things like this or like this, like especially as health and health value when the fire rate will be changed. Okay, so you make it change. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about changing it. Just change the value. Don't worry about checking if it needs to be changed. Just change it. So you've got lots of things. Health value and projectile damage will be changed. That cool. Lots of little changes here. You could even say argue too much. So you got when they change health, you're changing like the projectiles behaviors. I could see, which is a cool concept in itself. How applicable it is, I don't know, but it's a cool concept. But a lot of it, I feel like you could have done a little bit better by tidying this up, so it's not just one thing we can just change every single time. We can sort of condense it somewhat. Use structs. Structs are going to be your friend in this case. Maps also useful. You can also use string key value combinations to accomplish what you're trying to do, and you can update things as you of and when. Think about how to consolidate some of this stuff down, because this is quite a bit, and the problem when you have code that's quite expansive, when it's a lot, especially all on one page like here, like for example, you're using all these events but no functions. Use functions, break it down, make it nice and easy for yourself. Yeah, a lot of these things don't need to be on here. When it's all like this is hard to navigate, hard to read. So try to break it down into functions. It makes your life a little bit easier, and also makes it a lot easier to call them from other places as well. But we can see the game working if I just go here. So you've got a slight few issues. Like you got this homing one over here, which kind of weird for cannonball. But one thing to note is that if you stand over here, you'll see it just bend around the corner. It kind of defies all physics. It would have been better to have like the cannon actually turn itself, like the muzzle turn itself, to actually aim rather than have the ball spin in the air looking at you. Here we can see the burst in action, and here we can see like explosive ones. Oh no, they're explosive. This one, just a singular one, just bounces around. But yeah, I like the combination of options. I just think they could be a bit organized, a bit better, to make things a bit neater and cleaner for the end user. And the last one we're going to look at in this video is from Bobby. Let me get his name right. Bobby Rösehag, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, who submitted this cannon design. And again, we've got a similar sort of setup as we've seen in other ones, where we can choose the various common settings we would expect, such as the ammo, whether it's auto fire, how frequently it fires, things like that, which is all good. But I want to just highlight and point to a common thing that we've seen with all of these, most of these anyway, is whenever you're doing like begin play events, do make sure you're splitting them off into their own events or functions, as you're going to have a lot easier time making it useful for various other occasions in the game. So we can do begin firing and turning it off and on when we tell it to do so on begin play there, and that's set up a timer and off it goes. And as we can see here, it's standard stuff that we've seen before. We can spawn a projectile, spawn particle effects, playing the sounds, all these various things going on over here, and pausing a timer so it stops firing at a certain amount of time. So make sure you are splitting up your events into like the built-in events, the ones that are game mode related, so like begin play, for example, and branch them off into their own separate functions or events to make life a little bit easier for yourself and make it more flexible for other uses in your game too. So as I mentioned, there's a couple of key things that people have done in common that we want to try and improve, such as the ability to turn event begin plays into other events that we can easily call and command whenever we so wish and desire. Doing this gives us a lot more flexibility and room to maneuver when we want to make things turn on, turn off, and also trigger them if we need to via sequences. I didn't see too many people putting hooks for things to expand upon later if we wanted to build out different child classes of these things, but there was some room for lots of interesting iteration with configurations of our canon. So really good job and well done to everyone involved. Don't forget to make sure you're labeling and categorizing your variables, making it easy for the designer to be able to identify and find the things they need to change to get them exactly where they want to go. And alongside that, don't forget to also include error checking to make sure that designers would know what's gone wrong if they're putting it into the game and finding it's not working. You've got some error checks going on to tell them what's happening. All vital for a game program going into a game design in a game studio. So there you go. If you want to take part in a creator challenge for next month, all you have to do is sign up to patreon.com/Ryan Laley, and it's open to all patrons at all tiers, and you can find each month's video up there on the first of each month. And we'll go through, submit them, and review them. And I'll be in touch with the best one to give you a badge, a special Ryan Lee Games badge. I'll try our best to send it to you, those who are notable. Maybe not the best one, but the ones that I felt like the most notable ones, the ones that I feel should be rewarded with a little thing like an exclusive badge like that. So thank you so much everyone for submitting for this month, and I look forward to your future submissions in the following months. Take care. Bye.